What's going on YouTube? It's TH back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my way too early NFL power rankings. This is again just for the sake of the exercise. This is done entirely too early, but hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button. It would help me and my channel a ton. If you're new around here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. Plenty of football content coming your way through the rest of the summer, and of course once we get to next season. And join me for a conversation down below in the comment section. This is just a catalyst for a conversation. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who's your favorite team? Where do you think they should slot in? Love to have your thoughts, and let's talk some football down in the comment section. I respond to just about every comment down there. Let's waste no time. Let's jump into it. I got the Houston Texans at 32. Also changing up the graphics a little bit, changing some of the design. Give me some of your feedback there if you have any strong thoughts. If you like it, don't like it, love to have some of your opinions on that as well. I think the Texans, I like their draft. Kenyon Green maybe a little early at 15. Really like Derek Stingley Jr. at 3. But that being said, DSJ feels like the best cornerback in a group that's still pretty rough. You lose Justin Reed. The safeties aren't great. Add Kenyon Green. We'll see what Titus Howard looks like at tackle. You extend Laramie Tunsil. The offensive line's okay, but outside of Brandon Cooks, what playmakers are really there? The running back room isn't anything to write home about. Davis Mills was better than expected, but still probably one of the lower end starting quarterbacks, at least what we know with him right now. So I got the Texans at 32. I got the Seahawks at 31, not far off. I think Geno Smith probably ends up being the starting quarterback, at least early on, and then maybe if things start to, take a nosedive, if you will, Drew Lock will step in and get some reps, and maybe he'll get the chance to showcase what he's got. But outside of the wide receivers, there's just nothing really special about this team. Don't love the quarterback position, the offensive line. Sure, I like both tackles I took, but rookie tackles, there tends to be a steep learning curve. I think Charles Cross can step in and be pretty impactful right away, but Stone Forsythe, Abraham Lucas, what does that look like on the right tackle spot? The interior, I guess, is fine, but it's nothing crazy. I like Kenneth Walker. We'll see if Chris Carson's ever able to suit up. Hopefully he can. Then on the defensive side, pretty bad cornerback room. Not a lot to talk about when it comes to pass rush. They lose Bobby Wagner, so they're pretty putrid at all three levels, except for safety, if you want to lump that into the secondary. But talking about secondary play, I'd rather have elite corner play than elite safety play, so kind of tough. Where they are good, they have some strengths. Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs at safety, and then DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, but that's just not really enough. And again, I have to preface this is a league with a ton of parity. We saw it last year. The Jags, with maybe the worst NFL head coach in league history, beat the Bills 9-6. It's a league where legitimately anything can happen. This is 1 through 32 as even and as close as I've seen the entire league get. Now, maybe this upcoming season is starting to spread out a little bit as there's been an arms race in the AFC, but maybe there's a little less parity. But if it's anything like last year, there are 32 more than capable squads being put together. Panthers come in at 30. As of right now, Sam Darnold's starting quarterback. That's a problem. Like drafting Akim Ekwonu at 6. Feels like that offensive line's going to be taking a nice step forward. Also, you sign Austin Corbett and Taylor Moton, one of the best right tackles in the league. You extend DJ Moore. Robbie Anderson's happy he's not having to play with Baker Mayfield. At least that stands right now. That's the case. So I'm sure he's in a pretty good mood. Terrence Marshall, I think, is good for a step forward in year 2. The defense, you lose Hassan Reddick and you can't keep Stephon Gilmore around, but still think there's a lot to be excited about on that side of the football. I'm a huge Brian Burns fan. Maybe Davion Nixon and Derek Brown, those two starting D tackles, can continue to make some progress. Derek Brown, I know, let down a lot of Panthers fans last year. Maybe he takes that step forward this year. Shaq Thompson's an awesome player, and Jeremy Chinn's an up-and-coming potential superstar type of safety who has a nose for the football. So building blocks there, but it's just not a great team as of right now. In the Falcons at 29, there's plenty of people who think this might be the worst team in the NFL, and hey, I'm not going to fault you for it. The offensive line, I think, is worse than most people will realize. I like the idea of what they're putting together in the wide receiver spot. Lots of height and size, physicality. Drake London, Auden Tate, Kyle Pitts, and then you have Ryan Edwards, coming over in a trade with the Raiders. So intrigued to see what that looks like. And Mariota, probably one of the lower end league starters, but maybe he takes a step forward and reunited with Arthur Smith. Didn't go great the first time those two worked together in Tennessee, but now maybe Mariota has learned some stuff. Maybe Arthur Smith has changed up his scheme. We'll find out. And then on the defensive side, Casey Hayward, AJ Terrell, that's fine. Hayward's definitely better in like a Gus Bradley cover 3 heavy system, so it'll be interesting to see how he looks in Dean P's system. But that being said, AJ Terrell's a stud. But outside of that, Grady Jarrett and a lot of question marks. on the defensive side. I do appreciate them drafting, D'Angelo Malone as well as Arnold Ebiketie. Feels like they're going to find some young players who can step up and add some pass rush, but for the most part, that defense is pretty putrid. I'm intrigued by what the wide receiver position could look like for this team in a year's time. The Jags coming in 28. I really still don't know a great analogy to describe their offseason. They got better, but it felt like they worked their hardest to not. Definitely an overpay for Christian Kirk, an overpay for Foye Oluokun, who, young player, maybe he gets better. Brandon Sheriff, an upgrade, but wrong side of 30, a lot of money for a guard. They did improve the roster, but really the biggest improvement is going from, as I stated earlier, the worst head coach potentially in league history to Doug Peterson, who's won a Super Bowl. And even if you don't think he deserves all the credit, just by it not being Urban Meyer feels like a huge step up. And, honestly, this is not to, slander Darrell Bevell, but he has not had a whole lot of success follow him around when he's been an offensive coordinator, whether it was in Detroit, Seattle, or, of course, in Jacksonville. So I also think there's probably a scheme step forward with, the Doug Peterson philosophy and his coaching staff as opposed to Meyer, Bevell, and crew. So I think there's going to be a step forward for the Jags, though. They did try their hardest to minimize the amount that they grow and improve as a team. So it's kind of tough, but I'll put them up to 28. Bears at 27, I'm just worried about what that offense looks like around Justin Fields. Lethargic wide receiver room outside of Darnell Mooney, and he's probably better as a 2. The offensive line, plenty to be concerned about there. Maybe it's okay, maybe it's not, but you lose James Daniels. Not overly impressed with who's still around. Tevin Jenkins should take a step forward, though. So one of your bookend tackles ideally is already in place. And, realistically, kind of like what the Packers are going to see. Can Aaron Rodgers make the most of a little? Maybe Justin Fields takes a massive leap forward in year 2. And he makes Darnell Mooney into a Pro Bowl caliber guy. I mean, he gets something out of Byron Pringle that Patrick Mahomes couldn't. So err on the side of caution there, I would say. So I'm really worried about the Bears offensively. Defense, I worry about the pass rush. Robert Quinn has been up and down throughout his career. Do like the players they drafted, in round 2 with Jaquan Brisker and name is escaping me, Fuller from Washington. But I think that secondary will be pretty good. You are relying on a couple of rookies making an instant impact, but nonetheless, I think that secondary will take a step forward. And then the Giants at 26. This is a roster that I feel okay about for everything outside of the quarterback position. Daniel Jones, though, very turnover prone, and I am anticipating Kenny Golladay plays better than he did last year. I've always been pretty high on Kenny Golladay. And, I think when you draft Evan Neal, you have your tackle situation figured out. You sign Mark Lewinsky, you sign John Feliciano. Yeah, maybe you're looking for one more IOL option, but I feel pretty confident 4/5 of it average or better. So feeling better about the offensive line. I think the wide receivers will take a step forward. And Wink Martindale's had an awesome track record as a defensive coordinator. They had Kayvon Thibodeau, opposite of Zizo Jalari. I like that edge grouping. And then, you may lose James Bradbury, but Adoree Jackson is a solid, capable outside starting quarterback. I do worry about on the other side. Is that Aaron Robinson? Because coming out of UCF, definitely thought of him more as a nickel. Worry about his foot speed. But, if Wink Martindale and, Joe Shane are feeling confident with playing him on the outside, then they get to see him every day and I don't. So they must know something that I don't. So maybe they'll be okay there. But Bradbury, definitely a tough loss there. In the secondary, this really comes down to Daniel Jones. Does he get better under Brian Daboll? If he does, this team skyrockets up from 26. If he continues to battle turnovers, this is probably about where they'll live. Lions coming to 25. This is an exciting team, right? So Jared Goff, what does he look like now that he has some legit weapons? You see Jameson Williams on the screen, him, DJ Chark, Amon-Ra St. Brown looking to continue his late season momentum from a year ago into this upcoming season. That wide receiver room looks a whole lot better. I already like Jamal Williams, and I like DeAndre Swift in the backfield. That offensive line is in a healthy spot. Jared Goff may not be great. He may be, number 32 starting quarterback in the league. But that supporting cast around him might be enough to make him fine, adequate, passable. And then on the defensive side, I like what they've done addressing pass rush, right? Aiden Hutchinson, the Okwara brothers. You draft Josh Pascal. Like the 2 interior guys they drafted a year ago. Lee McNeil was somebody I was really high on coming out of NC State. And then Levi Onwuzurike, single gap penetrating D-tackle. Love what he can do alongside McNeil. So, man, that front four is almost feeling as good as their starting offensive line. Now, advantage offensive line for sure, but that defensive line looking like it could be something potent. Still figuring out the linebacker position. They are really high on Alex Anzalone, so we'll see. And, in the secondary, it's going to definitely take a pretty big step forward for Jeff Okudah. But he was, I stand by it, one of the best quarterback prospects I've ever been able to see my eyes on. I mean, better than Denzel Ward, in my opinion. Was as clean as it got when it comes to technique standpoints, avoided penalties. There's really no reason he shouldn't be an awesome NFL player. Obviously, the torn Achilles last year kind of derails what he might have been able to grow to in year 2, and Achilles injuries are really tough because they tend to linger a lot more than what we have, kind of come to understand from an ACL injury. Sports science has, made some huge leaps in that area, not quite on the Achilles side just yet. So I do hope that he can hit his full potential, but you might be asking for a little too much now. But Ifeatu Melifonwu, coming out of Syracuse, second-year player, maybe he shines. Amani Uruwariye had like 6 interceptions last year. Really liked him coming out of Penn State, and he's put together some good play during his time with the Lions. So I'm pretty high on Detroit, and I think they could creep up even higher than number 25. On to the next 8 teams. New York Jets at 24. Kind of like what we talked about with the Giants. This comes down to the quarterback position. Zach Wilson takes a step forward. They're skyrocketing up from 24 because the rest of the roster's in a healthy spot. Offensive line is good. Assuming Mekhi Becton can play, offensive line's in a good spot between him and George Fant. Also got the guards with the signing of Lincoln Tomlinson, drafting AVT a year ago, Elijah Vera Tucker. And then the wide receiver room. You spent a top 10 pick on Garrett Wilson. Corey Davis slides in your number 2 spot. Elijah Moore becomes your slot. I'm liking the way that's put together. They signed CJ Uzomah. They bring in a Tyler Conklin. Feeling good about the tight end spot. And then you flip over to the defensive side, and one defensive-minded head coach, Robert Saleh, had a ton of success with San Francisco, and I think he even did a pretty serviceable job with the talent that he had on his roster last year. It wasn't a great defense, but I think he was trying to maximize what little he might have had, especially no Carl Lawson. He's coming back. You drafted Jermaine Johnson in the first round. You extend John Franklin Myers. Quinnen Williams ideally should continue to get better. Linebacking core is still a little meh, but drafting Sauce Gardner, signing DJ Reed to go along with somebody I like in Bryce Hall. Man, you lose Marcus May, but you figure it out. Jordan Whitehead and crew, they'll have a rotation of safeties, but I'm feeling really, really good about that defense compared to where it was a year ago. They spent a ton of resource investment in the secondary, also added an edge opposite of Carl Lawson, so I'm feeling optimistic. Again, this will come down to Zach Wilson. Pittsburgh at 23. Another team that will come down to the quarterback position, but honestly, no matter who it is, that offensive line scares me. That secondary is really worrisome. So, Stephon Tuitt retires. The teams start doubling up TJ Watt, and maybe Cam Hayward battles through injuries. I can see where that pass rush is mitigated, and that secondary, it just becomes open seasons for, teams in their division, which include a quarterback named Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. A little problematic there for Pittsburgh, on top of, the other teams we'll see throughout the course of the season. So, worried about the offensive line, worried about the secondary, worried about the quarterback position. Those are pretty alarming concerns there for the Steelers. Next up, Washington Commanders. Sorry for the abbreviation, but it's a lot of letters to try to squeeze in. But Commanders, I feel like, are a really similar boat. The strength of that team is definitely on the defensive side. I think the Commanders' defense just a little bit better, at least if it were to fully come together. Pittsburgh would have an awesome pass rush at its peak and a serviceable secondary. I think if the Commanders hit on all levels, that's exactly what they'll do. They'll hit on all levels, and that defense will be unbelievably good. And, Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz at their worst are pretty similar, but at their best, Carson Wentz is an upgrade there. And even as someone who's not a big fan of Carson Wentz, I have to acknowledge that. So at least from, the higher end of variants of Carson Wentz, he's a step forward from a Taylor Heineke. So you should expect better play there. Hopefully they sign and extend Terry McLaurin, because there is no reason they don't bring him back. And honestly, they should pay him extra for what he's had to play with in regards to quarterbacks around him. So that's a joke, but kid's earned it. They should definitely extend him. Hopefully he's in training camp once we get there in about a month's time. New England Patriots at 21. I'm just concerned about a lack of superstar talent on the outside, both offensively but defensively. I'm worried about average or better play from the cornerback groups. And what I have to come together is Bill Belichick and that coaching staff are going to shift to a zone-heavy defense, which is obviously something Bill Belichick is not necessarily known for doing, but he is the best head coach in NFL history. His resume speaks for himself. If that's the move he wants to make, okay, he has all the right in the world to be able to do that. Time will tell that story. But I do worry about that secondary, and then getting back to the offensive side, the offensive line's got some new pieces that all come together clean. Does Mac Jones take a step forward, or is he just a league average solid starter like he was last year? So questions to be answered there, but the Patriots certainly will be in flux. I can see them going up or down from here, depending on how those scheme changes go. And of course, if it comes down to the quarterback position, Mac Jones, does he get better? Tennessee Titans at 20. I am beyond concerned about that wide receiver room. If Treylon Burks does not make a pretty sizable impact as a rookie, it's Robert Woods and who else? So that's obviously concerning, especially when your quarterback is Ryan Tannehill. He needs a solid supporting cast. He missed my QB power rankings and tier ranking, definitely go back. I kind of talk about it a little bit more on where I see Tannehill at this point in his career. You need Derrick Henry to stay healthy throughout the course of the season. That is their absolute best shot, and that has been their identity. They somehow managed to battle through all the injuries, but I think if Tennessee were to have the same injury concerns and woes that they had a year ago, I don't think it's going to fare as well. Though Mike Vrabel is one of the best coaches in the NFL, so just like Pittsburgh, Tennessee, sometimes you get a great coach and they find a way to make it work. New England, of course, the same thing with Bill Belichick. So sometimes coaches piece it together and, maybe there's something they see that I don't yet. Minnesota Vikings come in at number 19. Really excited to see what this offense looks like. They just bring in Albert Wilson. I think him and KJ Osborne, nice compliments to one another as that third potential receiver. I think Albert Wilson a little bit more downfield speed, despite KJ Osborne making some big plays last year, but more three receiver sets. I'm intrigued to see what that looks like. And, I've been kind of thinking about this offseason for Minnesota, and a lot of people are saying, Quezzy's making a lot of the same moves Rick Spielman did. And, maybe that analytics background was a little overhyped. He also has that Wall Street background, very business oriented. But even if Rick Spielman was maybe analytically solid when it comes to trading back in the draft, more is more there. Maybe part of the analytics shift for this team between Kevin O'Connell, who, coming from the McVay tree, they're not always great with their game management, but they feel a little bit more aggressive than what, Mike Zimmer and crew and the Kubiak OCs before that were letting Kirk Cousins do. So in 3rd and 10, I know a lot of Vikings fans have voiced their displeasure with 3rd and 10 draws. Like, Dalvin Cook's great, but we need to throw it here. You got to throw it this distance to move the stick. So maybe that's part of the change and understanding the analytics. We're going to pass on early downs. We're going to not go 3rd and 10 draws because more often than not, they don't work. 4th and shorts on the other side of the field. Maybe instead of trying to punt it and put their opponent in the coffin corner or whatever, they go for it there. So maybe that's where the analytics edge really comes from. And maybe instead of changing the approach, it's maximizing the talent that's on the field. And when you think about it from that perspective, maybe this team could be even better than 19, right? Maybe if you pull back the reels and the reins off of Kirk Cousins and let him try to do more, maybe he has that much better of a season. And maybe Justin Jefferson's that much more happy. And maybe Adam Thielen has, another huge season. And that third wide receiver, whoever it ends up being, makes a big splash. That's just kind of me thinking off the top of my head there. Love to have your thoughts there in Minnesota, but a team with a lot of talent on the offensive side, like Zadarius Smith. If he can stay healthy, and Danielle Hunter, that's an awesome 1-2 duo. I think they're figuring out the secondary. Really like the attention to detail, Lewis Seen, as well as Andrew Booth Jr. Understanding we got to get better here. We also got to get younger there, so that's where they spent their first 2 picks. Appreciate Quezzy's mindset going into the draft there. Saints coming in at 18, and the man on your screen, again, this comes down to the quarterback position. Man, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas feel like 2 of the best route runners in 2 very distinctly different ways. Pretty much Michael Thomas, everything within 15 yards to the line of scrimmage. That's his wheelhouse. And then Chris Olave, 15 plus yards down the field. That's really where his strength is. He's not going to do a whole lot after the catch. And Michael Thomas is not necessarily the most fleet of foot, so he's not going to make a whole lot of 50, 60, 70 yard bomb plays come in his reel. So I think it's a really nice combo to one another. The offensive line comes with a little bit of concern. Can Trevor Penning or James Hurst, replace what you lost in Teron Armstead? We'll have to wait and see there, but more than likely that's a step back. Alvin Kamara, hopefully he's on the field for the full 17. Again, we have to wait and see what more reports come out of his situation. The defense is still solid, and Dennis Allen's still calling the plays on that side. There's no reason to think that's not one of the best defenses in football again. So I'm seeing a solid supporting cast around Jameis Winston. Really good defense on their side to hopefully make the job week in and week out objective for Jameis in the offense a little easier. Man, if he can limit turnover, if we can basically get 17 games of what we saw last year from Jameis, this is a scary Saints team. This is coming from a guy who a year ago from now was fading the Saints pretty heavily. Now I'm starting to get back on their hype train, which that's sports, right? So moving on to the Cardinals, they come in at 17. Maybe the DeAndre Hopkins suspension worked out to their benefit, right? Because this has been a team the last couple of years under Cliff Kingsbury, got onto hot starts and then faltered. So maybe, DeAndre Hopkins suspended for 6 games. That's that, mid-season reinforcements that they need to be able to stay hot, maintain a high level of play throughout the course of the year. But Marquise Hollywood Brown, that trade wasn't one that I was super high on from a Cardinals aspect, but especially with the suspension of Nuke Hopkins, feels like a move they really needed to make, and now they have a really nice compliment. And I think Hollywood's going to want his money, probably 20 plus, pretty safe to say. Maybe he wants A.J. Brown, $25 million a year, but man, if they can find a way to keep it right around 20, and then the comparisons can start to come, Christian Kirk for 18 or Hollywood Brown for 20, sure, pay the extra $2 million a year for Hollywood Brown. He's a better player right now. We'll see what that contract situation kind of evolves into. But that'll be an interesting thing to cover throughout the rest of the year. But Hollywood Brown, Nuke Hopkins, AJ Green's back, a ton of investment in the tight end room, which I think was a little bit of an overkill, but plenty of investment there all the same. Kyler Murray, if he continues to make the growth and the strides that he's made year over year, there's a lot of reason for optimism there for the Cardinals. And I plan on doing, one reason for optimism for each and every NFL team. That may be mine for the Cardinals. Do worry about that secondary on the defensive side. And can they generate consistent pass rush? Chandler Jones had a big week one, was kind of quiet the rest of the way. Cardinals fans are always quick to point that out. That's not necessarily mean it's going to be different this year. It could just be quiet. Yeah, like take away that 5-sack showing from Chandler Jones. Maybe it's just a quiet and abysmal pass rush. So J.J. Watt can stay on the field. That obviously changes the tune of that a ton. But granted, the guy's battled a ton of injuries, so I don't know how much you can really count on him playing the full 17. Najee Sanders, Cam Thomas, your 2 third-round picks to help in the edge department, they come with their concerns as well. So don't know if there's any for sure answers to that question of where's the pass rush coming for Arizona. Next up, I got the Indianapolis Colts, another team that made some moves, and of course the quarterback position is what will determine how this team's season plays out, and where Ryan, it goes back to what I was talking about with Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke, where their floors may be pretty similar, but their heights are different. Carson Wentz at his best might be an upgrade a little bit over Matt Ryan just because of the arm strength where Ryan is now versus where Wentz is still, at a healthy age and with good arm strength. But that being said, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of a difference between the top end of their play, but the low side of their play couldn't be further. Matt Ryan, given him all his faults, he's not great against pressure. He's pretty quick to give up on a play if he starts to feel uncomfortable in the pocket. He'll just hit the deck. But that being said, he's not going to lose your game. He's not going to throw a left-handed pick 6 against the Tennessee Titans like Carson Wentz did. So I think because of that, I'm a little more optimistic on the Colts this year. It's kind of amazing. Again, going back to the Saints. The Saints and the Colts were 2 teams I was fading last year. I'm starting to get a little more optimistic about them this year. But Michael Pittman Jr. was a big step forward last year. And I said he needed to if that wide receiver room is going to be anywhere near viable. I think he might have to get a little bit better. Again, this year, you need Paris Campbell to stay healthy. Alec Pierce, vertical, based wide receiver. That's an interesting element to add into the mix. And maybe they're not done yet. Maybe they do reunite Julio and Matt Ryan. But on the defensive side, you may lose Alan Williams, who's now the defensive coordinator in Chicago, and Bears head coach Matt Eberflus, former DC for Indianapolis. So some turnover there, but it's still a team that's anchored by one of the best playmakers and turnover creators in football in Darius Leonard. DeForest Buckner's a stud there in the middle. Great safeties play. They've been able to manage with, lesser cornerback group. So I think this defense will still be solid. And I think Matt Ryan takes away some of the damage that bad quarterback play has dealt this team in years past. So I'm a little optimistic. I think this team's certainly in the playoff mix. Miami Dolphins coming at 15. Some of you've heard it before. This comes down to the quarterback. But, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert. This might be the fastest team in all of football. Plus, Connor Williams, Teron Armstead. It's starting to feel like that offensive line's about 4/5 the way there. Whether it's Robert Hunt or Liam Eichenberg playing, right guard, right tackle, or it's the other way around, and Hunt's kicking in to play guard and Eichenberg's the tackle. However they sort that out, feel confident that those two will be serviceable on that side. Maybe they sign J.C. Treader to play center, and then I'm feeling really good about that offensive line in front of Tua. But can Mike McDaniel get more out of Tua? We saw what Shanahan and McDaniel did with Jimmy Garoppolo, and I don't see why there's a reason to think that they can't do something similar, because in a lot of ways their strengths are aligned. Then on the defensive side, Jalen Phillips, I'd like to see him get even better this upcoming season. Sneaky good signing with Melvin Ingram. I think he's always, over the past couple of years, he may not be that superstar or high-level star player he once was with the Chargers, but he's a productive pass rusher, and he finds ways to make guys around him more productive, which, how do you do that at the edge rusher position? I don't know. But really like that addition. They got him for cheap. Jerome Bakers and linebacker who's seemingly everywhere and nowhere all at once. Javon Holland, what a huge success story for this team last year. And, I'll pat myself on the back. His draft class, him and Javon Merrick. A lot of people wanted to crown Merrick by far and away safety one. I'm saying Javon Holland's not far off in my books. He's right on his heels. And, Holland puts together an awesome season a year ago. And, of course, Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL. So I think the defense will be solid despite, Brian Flores' influence and impact on that side of the ball gone. Can Mike McDaniel work his magic with Tua? That will be the, X factor for this team. Philadelphia Eagles, man, I love what they did this offseason. Quiet during free agency. You bring back an Anthony Harris. Big signing is Hassan Reddick, which maybe he'll be an off-ball blitzing linebacker in that 4-3 playing kind of a Sam role. Or maybe he'll be, a defensive end and he'll fit 4-3, put your hand in the dirt and go. I think there's some options there with how to use him, but it's a team that prioritizes pass rush. Hassan Reddick brings just that. Then, you go into the draft, you trade one of your first-round picks for A.J. Brown. So you have a great 1A, 1B situation with Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. And two guys that can win in a variety of different ways, making the life of Jalen Hurts that much easier. And because you respect the passing game, it's already a team that had a pretty potent rushing attack from like week 7 onward last year. Whenever they played Tampa Bay, it seems like after that game, they really figured it out. So if the passing attack's more lethal, more running room for Jalen Hurts, more running room for Miles Sanders, and so on and so forth. Getting back to the defense, though, to finish off the draft conversation, Jordan Davis and then Nakobe Dean, one of the steals in the draft in the 3rd round. It sounds like he's going to play. And if your concerns about Nakobe Dean were, okay, well, he's small and he got to play with an awesome talent in front of him, including Jordan Davis, well, he goes to a franchise that will always prioritize defensive line, and he has Jordan Davis still in front of him. So that, I don't know. Nakobe Dean, we'll see what his defensive rookie of the year odds are, but that could be a really sneaky pick there, especially if he is able to play this season. He could be exactly what this team's been looking for, and they got to have been unbelievable value then in the 3rd round. So huge fan of what the Eagles have done. Can Jalen Hurts take another step forward? I've been pretty high on Hurts throughout his NFL career. Can he prove me right once again? Moving on to the Raiders, another team with a lot of moves, but the difference maker being Davante Adams. This team needed a number 1, and not only did they get one, they got wide receiver 1 when it comes to how I view the NFL and its landscape. Davante Adams, to me, is still the best wide receiver in football, and he's just the ultimate checkmate, if you will. Honestly, it's almost more like the checkmate breaker. He's like a queen on a chessboard. Anytime you get into check, I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but feels like the exact piece to be able to get you out of that tough situation, because that's exactly what we saw him do with Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers, one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, consistently used Davante Adams as a bailout option. So really excited to see with him, Derek Carr, their chemistry going back. That's enticing. You draft Dylan Parham, and now I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about that offensive line. Denzel Good comes back from injury. You'd like to think Alex Leatherwood in year 2 is going to take a step forward. So it feels like they're about 4/5 away there from completing the offensive line. Of course, Davante Adams, it makes Darren Waller's life a lot easier, and then Hunter Renfrow will continue to eat from the slot. Worried about the defense a little bit. Chandler Jones, that's a big signing. And him and Max Crosby, that's an awesome pass rush duo. But linebacking core, not great. In the secondary, in specific, the cornerback room leaves them to be desired. But this team could legitimately find a way to put up 30 a game, and I wouldn't be shocked just because Davante Adams is that good. Derek Carr had moments of being an elite quarterback last year. Give him Darren Waller, too. And Josh McDaniels is a great offensive coordinator. Man, this team could be sneaking. Also, while we're talking about new hires and, Josh McDaniels is the head coach, but he'll also be calling plays. But Patrick Graham, that's an impact defense coordinator in my eyes. He worked wonders with a solid defense in the Giants, and felt like he was maximizing the talent he had on that roster. So I think he could do something similar and, maybe elevate that side of the ball a little bit more, considering I do have concerns on that side a lot more compared to the offense. Moving on to the Cowboys here at 12. They're kind of a tough one to gauge because are you going to get the first, 9-10 weeks of last season Dallas? You're going to get the tail end and tail spin Cowboys towards the end of the regular season. I'm hoping it's more the first half rather than the second half of last season, because, man, when Kellen Moore and Dak Prescott seemingly on the same page, that offense was unbelievably fun to watch. Obviously, you lose Amari Cooper, so it's a different dynamic there on the outside, but you got to think it's going to be Jalen Tolbert. It'll be Michael Gallup whenever he's healthy. Put on the outside with CeeDee Lamb, some flexibility to play inside and out, but realistically, if you can work some matchups in your favor, play him in the slot, and then kind of let him be a force, especially underneath, get the ball in his hands, let him be a playmaker. I think that works out really well for this offense when they do that. Two good running backs, Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard. You draft Tyler Smith, big fan of that selection. Feels like not only a solid upgrade at left guard, but a potential Tyron Smith left tackle replacement. So feeling better about that offensive line. We'll see about Tyron Steele over at right tackle, but Cowboys fans seem to be convinced that he could be a high-level starter, so we will see. But then on the defensive side, obviously losing Randy Gregory is a big blow there, but that's kind of the joy of having a Micah Parsons. I'm also interested to see they drafted Moon Clark later round this year. Feels like a guy who's going to probably sit out this year. May not ever play in the NFL, but if he does, you get a lot of that return on your investment next year. But what about Jabril Cox? He was one of the better value picks in last year's NFL draft at the top of the 4th round. So I'm interested to see, bring back LV on a 1-year, like $3 million deal. It's a small contract. There's no real incentive to see him on the field if Jabril Cox is better. So I'm interested to see if Cox finds a way onto the field and finds a way into a starting spot potentially this year. So if he can do that, plus you have Leighton Vander Esch, then it really opens up with what you can do. Micah Parsons primarily using him as an edge rusher, especially 3rd and long passing situations, utilizing He has unbelievable athletic ability to get to the quarterback. So options there for Dallas. Do worry a little bit about that that defense in general. But I will say, going to the secondary, I think Trevon Diggs will be a little bit better in coverage this year. Now, I'm not saying he's going to have 11 interceptions and, he's going to be even better than that, but I think the harm that comes, and the big talking point was, interceptions versus, yards given up, big plays allowed. I think he's still learning the quarterback position. Keep in mind, like we talked about, wide receiver to corner transfer, that's always been the narrative around him. Let's continue to give him time. So maybe he doesn't have 11 interceptions next year. Maybe it's just 6. Maybe he's just better in coverage. The Pro Football Focus coverage grade goes up. The yards allowed goes down. The catches allowed go down. The touchdowns allowed go down. I think there's some improvement there to be had for Trevon Diggs, which changes the narrative, and he becomes a really interesting player to watch for me next year. Denver Broncos at 11. You got Russell Wilson. Congratulations. We were saying a year ago this time, they're a quarterback away. And congratulations, you checked the biggest box. You got a quarterback, and you got a damn good one at that with Russell Wilson. I'm so excited to see year 2 Javonte Williams. I know they brought back Melvin Gordon, but do not let him get in the way of Javonte Williams take over year 2. Obviously, we had to let the off-the-field stuff, play out for Jerry Jeudy, see if a suspension comes out and how long it might be. I think Cortland Sutton is not DK Metcalf, perfect match for Russell Wilson, but he's not far off. And I think Cortland Sutton does a little bit more after the catch maybe than a DK Metcalf. Metcalf naturally is kind of a specimen that's hard to tackle, but I think Sutton has some natural yak ability in his game as opposed to just being big, tall, strong, and fast and hard to bring down, which, makes you a pretty good yak player all the same. But all that to say, the offense is there for Denver. And I think Nathaniel Hackett, he's had success wherever he's gone, whether it was working with Blake Bortles in Jacksonville or working with a back-to-back MVP winner and Aaron Rodgers. That dude gets results. So excited to see what that offense looks like for Russell Wilson. On the defensive side, bringing in Randy Gregory to minimize the loss of obviously trading away Von Miller last year. They also drafted Nick Benito. You still have Malik Reed. Feels like they're going to have a nice rotation there on the edge. Still figuring out the inside linebacker position, but it's a more devalued position in the NFL. Anyways, the secondary I still think is really, really solid. Patrick Surtain in year 2 is only going to get better. Ronald Darby was better than I anticipated a year ago. Justin Stone's still one of the best safeties in football. So, a lot to be optimistic about. Big fan of what this Broncos team put together this offseason and how they've slowly but surely grown that roster into what they wanted it to look like. And I think now is pretty much what George Payton kind of had in mind as maybe not the end game final product, but pretty darn close to it. It's just unfortunate that division is unfreaking real. They're not even in the top team in the AFC West. I think memory serves, there's 2 teams ahead of them in this power ranking. Moving on anyways, though, the 49ers, really excited to see what Trey Lance, and I know they still have Jimmy Garoppolo. They got to make that trade, right? Like, I just can't see how this team would justify all that they did to get Trey Lance and move up. They moved heaven and earth to get Trey Lance at 3 to then not start him for 2 years. So that feels a little questionable, but to that point, if you're going to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo and get that $25 million, which is not guaranteed, it would be fully recouped back into their salary cap. Why didn't you use that to keep Laken Tomlinson around? Why didn't you use that to go sign another cornerback or add another interior offensive lineman? Alex Mack just retired. Now you have a hold center. So part of this offseason was really questionable when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, but all the same, like a lot of people said last year with Jalen Hurts and that running ability, being able to raise the floor for an offense, going from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance, I still think it's a high floor system. Going from Garoppolo, who just does what Shanahan's asking, and he runs that offense, which is a high floor offense in itself. But Trey Lance and his running ability playing in that system feels like, okay, minimum, this offense will be solid, capable, good enough to win games. But Trey Lance presents that upside, more arm strength, his ability to use his legs and do stuff that Jimmy Garoppolo can. He can't create as much as Trey Lance, and he doesn't have the same window for busted coverages turning into big plays. So I still think Lance should be the guy going into this year, but I don't know. That's tough. But whoever the quarterback is, they managed to hold on to Deebo Samuel, at least as of right now. Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and they find a way to just engineer playmakers. I mean, those guys have talent, but in the running back position, Elijah Mitchell encapsulates that. They just find guys who work, and they make them really, really good. I'm a big fan of Elijah Mitchell. He was on my fantasy teams last year. Maybe that's why I'm biased. But on the defensive side, you drafted Drake Jackson. I think he's a really, really good D forward replacement. And the fact that they're moving on from D forward, I think, showcases that maybe they like Drake Jackson that much, right? Or maybe he's really stepped up and impressed early on enough to where they're like, hey, we don't need D anymore. Drake's going to step in that spot. But him, Nick Bosa, couldn't be any happier with that. Eric Armstead's been a really solid pro as well. Fred Warner, don't need to say a whole lot there. That dude's a stud. You bring in Charvarius Ward, different system, so it's interesting to see how he'll fit into that. But good that they, invested in the secondary where they needed to get better. A little concerned about the safety room, but when you got that type of pass rush, it'll mitigate the harm that your secondary could cause. Again, this comes down to Shanahan and what he's doing at the quarterback position, but made it to the NFC Championship game a year ago for a reason. This is a good football team. Cleveland Browns coming at number 9. Deshaun Watson is an elite quarterback when he's on the field, aside from, maybe being a shitty human being. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not in that case. I don't know enough I don't have enough legal knowledge to talk more on that, but when he's on the field, he's a damn good player. And Amari Cooper, a really awesome route runner and a great wide receiver still in my eyes. And look at him at $20 million after the wide receiver market explodes this offseason. That feels like one of the better deals in football at that position. And then one of the best running games in the NFL, an awesome offensive line, and a great head coach with an offensive system in place, Kevin Stefanski. In the defense, you bring back Jadeveon Clowney. I think Chase Winovich, I think this could be a year where he really showcases what he can do just as a true DPR. I don't know if he'll ever be anything more than that, but as that number 3 rusher for Cleveland and not having to play a complicated position in New England where like a Kyle Van Noy is really good in coverage, but he also brings some pass rush into it, you're being asked to do both. This is a spot where it's like, Winovich, put your hand in the dirt, go get the quarterback. That's your job. Do it. So I'll be interested to see what steps forward he takes this year. But, Denzel Ward, I think John Johnson III could have a bounce back season. Still a fan of Grant Talbot and the talent he brings to the table. So there's talent all over the roster, literally at every level on both sides of the ball. There is talent there. There is no reason this team should not be, 1, in the playoffs, and 2, knocking on the door of a potential Super Bowl run. So they got to be in the top 10. Big fan of what they did this offseason. Moving on to the top 8. LA Chargers come in at number 8. You make the trade for Khalil Mack. You sign J.C. Jackson. That's the investment on the defensive side. Also, Sebastian Joseph Day trying to plug up the middle with a D tackle so you play more too high, which is ideally what Staley wants to do. I appreciate the focus on that side of the football and understanding, hey, instead of asking Justin to score 30 a game, maybe we lower the bar and ask him to score 24. Maybe score 25. And then on the offensive side, you bring back Mike Williams. I think they finish off the offensive line with Zion Johnson in the first, then Jamari Salyer. It's one of the steals of the draft in the 6th. I think those are your starting guards. You move Matt Filer out to right tackle where he's played in the past, and he's played well in the past. So I think the offensive line's fixed, which big smile on the face of Justin Herbert, big smile on the face of Austin Eckler and the rest of the running back crew that they have put together. So really excited to see what this offense comes together. I've been saying excited a lot. I'm really excited for the NFL season next year. But I think this offense, with a couple tweaks from Joe Lombardi, could be really potent. Plus the investments on the defensive side. There's no reason this team shouldn't be people's dark horse Super Bowl team, even though everybody's pegging them as their dark horse. So they're not really a dark horse. So I think the Chargers are legit, and that's why I have them in the top 8. Ravens coming in at number 7. This might be high for most people. Keep in mind, they lost every game after Marlon Humphrey went down, and I'm not saying Marlon Humphrey is the most valuable non-quarterback in the league, but for that system, especially with Wink Martindale on the DC at the time, he makes a huge difference. But Humphrey's back. Marcus Peters is healthy. Year 2 of Odafe Owe. This defense should be, if they're healthy, even better than it was last year. And, adding on top of that, you sign the $70 million man, Marcus Williams. You draft Kyle Hamilton at 14. Chuck Clark's still there. Maybe they end up trading him. But those 3 safeties, good in various ways. And you can do a whole lot with them, and they can become chess pieces on your board. And you can really manipulate what a quarterback and an opposing offense sees on the field and try to generate some turnovers by confusing them. So that's a huge, huge advantage there for Mike McDonald, the new defensive coordinator in Baltimore. And on the offense, if Lamar Jackson's healthy, this team's dynamic. A couple of years ago, they cut Mark Ingram because he had the lowest yards per carry on the team behind Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who will be back and healthy this year, ideally. And Mark Ingram was still averaging 4+ yards a carry. So that's just kind of the baseline for this offense. They run the ball efficiently because what Lamar can do, and they force defenses to respect his running game, so it makes it that much easier for them to run the ball with their true running backs. It comes down to a wide receiver stepping up, but I think Rashad Bateman has what it takes. And maybe they sign a Will Fuller. That's something I mentioned in my last video. I think if you just need that over-the-top speed where safeties start creeping up closer and closer to the box to stop the run, bomb one right over the top. It only takes 1 or 2 of those. Realistically, probably only 1 a week. If you get 1 a week, you're doing something right. But it only takes a couple of those in a season to turn the tide in big games and honestly just make defenses respect it so safeties can't continuously do that, and it makes your running attack that much more efficient. It's a symbiotic relationship. They build off one another. So a big fan of the Ravens, and plus great organization, great head coach. They're just always pointed towards the right direction. Packers coming at 6. This is a tough one. This team could certainly take a step down. Give me 4 weeks. I'm going to probably not move them a whole lot in these power rankings because I think it's going to take time for that wide receiver room and Rodgers to gain more chemistry and figure out 3rd and 8. Who am I going to when I need a first down? Okay, well, I'm looking to take a deep shot. Who's that going to be? How quickly can Christian Watson acclimate to the NFL? So I think the wide receiver position is going to take some time to sort out and figure out who the guys are for Rodgers and that offense in general. So I think it'll take some time, maybe some bumps in the road early on, but this team will figure it out. They have a back-to-back MVP winner. He's one of the best in the game. He's one of the best in league history. Aaron Jones is an awesome running back. The offensive line, with David Bakhtiari coming back healthy, should be in a good spot. They also draft Zach Tom in the 6th round. I think that's an awesome, developmental swing tackle, maybe potential long-term starter. Did draft Kingsley Nagbari as that 3rd edge. So you lose Zadarius Smith, but Rashawn Gary was great for you last year, filling in for Zadarius Smith. You re-signed Preston Smith, and you draft Kingsley Nagbari. I think that pass rush will still be there, plus Devontae Wyatt. Not normally a player they would target because he's 24 years old, but that's an interior pass rusher help to go alongside Kenny Clark. I'm excited about that. And I'm not entirely sure what they're going to do with Quay Walker, if they're still running a lot of dime like they did last year and just have Devondre Campbell on the field, or they're going to find a way for Campbell and Quay Walker to both be on the field at the same time so they don't waste either the money or the draft pick. But they also re-signed Jai Alexander. That secondary feels like it's in a good spot. This is a really solid defense. It's gotten better and better over the course of the last 2 years. And I am worried about that wide receiver room. But I still think as a roster, it's still one of the best in the NFL. And of course, a great head coach and a great organization. Anything we talk about the Ravens, they're always pointed northwards. Then for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we're into the top 5. Brady is not retired, so they're still one of the best teams in the NFL. But they also re-signed Ryan Jensen. They, fleece New England. I guess that was, maybe that's so next time Brady retires, New England will be in the thank you retirement post for Tom Brady. They just give him Shaq Mason for free as an Alex Capo replacement. Luke Gedeke figures to be the other starting guard. Pretty high on him. Good 2nd-round pick. I think he can plug in and play right away. So, offensive line looks good. Brady's a stud. Russell Gage, really like him as that 3rd receiver. You extend Chris Godwin. If those 3 stay healthy, Evans, Godwin, and Gage, that's a special trio. But I think the advantage of signing Russell Gage is if something happens to a Godwin or an Evans, you have somebody who can feel confident filling in, playing on the outside. That's kind of what Atlanta just threw the fire and asked them to do last year. On the defensive side, I'm a little concerned about the pass rush. Can Shaq Barrett and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka get it done consistently? But that being said, signing Akeem Hicks to be an Ndamukong Suh replacement, not only probably a better run defender to where those two are at their career, definitely a pass rush upgrade for the snaps that they want that position to play. Like if Ndamukong Suh is willing to only play 400 snaps in a year, I think he'd be a pretty impactful DPR and spot pass rusher. And in big games like against the Rams last year, he was putting on a show. He can still play at a high level. I just don't think that's fair to ask of him for 800, 900 snaps week in and week out. So I think Akeem Hicks for that type of role might be an upgrade, and maybe that supplement some of my pass rush fear for the Buccaneers. The linebacker duo there in the middle, awesome. You bring back Carlton Davis. You kind of force that problem another year into the future. We'll see. I don't know if they'll be able to keep Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy Bunting as well, but made it work for another year. Dead cap will eventually haunt this team, but not for this season. They're still one of the best teams in the NFL in my eyes. And Tom Brady, a big reason why. I did want to talk about no Bruce Arians. So Byron Leftwich, him and Brady, the offense is solely theirs. And this would be a really awesome spot for Todd Bowles. Let's say Brady, let's say the Bucs win a Super Bowl and Brady retires. I wonder if that means Todd Bowles will want another head coaching job. Will he stay in Tampa Bay? Or if they don't win the Super Bowl, is he eventually going to move on? Are they going to want to reset if Brady retires? Kind of a fascinating quandary that they could find themselves in a year's time, but this is a big opportunity for Todd Bowles to show, hey, I did more with the Jets than a lot of people should have, and I can do the same thing with a team that's, playoff, ready to go. So, big opportunity for Bowles, and I'm excited to see what comes from it. Chiefs coming in number 4, similar to what we talked about with the Packers. You lose a superstar wide receiver, but I think the Chiefs did an even better job than Green Bay, mitigating that loss. An MVS, a Juju Smith-Schuster, drafting Sky Moore in the second. They have some better options in place in my eyes to supplement that loss. We'll see what CEH develops into. It just amazes me. Jerick McKinnon looks better in their postseason than CEH did throughout pretty much the entire season. Hopefully he figures it out. That offensive line in front of him is awesome. Like, they've legitimately sculpted one of the best offensive lines in football by drafting Reed Humphrey in the second. Trey Smith's a steal in the sixth. Right tackle's a little up in the air, but Darian Kennard, who they just stole in the fifth, could potentially start there. Maybe Lucas Niang, a couple years removed from being drafted. Maybe he takes that third-year leap that we see from tackle. So that offensive line's in a great spot. Patrick Mahomes, still in my mind, the best, most talented quarterback in the NFL over, taking out a 3-year sample size. I still think he's QB1 in my eyes. And on the other side of the football, with this draft, man, there's impact on the defensive side at all three levels. Concerned about the pass rush, especially considering they don't bring back Melvin Ingram, but George Karlaftis, that's a step in the right direction, and you just hope to God Frank Clark will give you anything to make him worthwhile. And then Chris Jones, one of the best interior pass rushers in the league, one of the best just interior defenders in the league. You can leave it at that. And, the linebacking room, you bring in a Leo Chenal, and especially considering Spags is a guy who will live and die by the blitz. Chenal feels like a great fit there, but also you have other options. Willie Gay Jr.'s better in coverage than Chenal, so you can flip them in and out. And, Nick Bolton Jr. coming out of Missouri going into year 2. Think he'll take a step forward. And, we'll see what that cornerback position kind of grows into. L'Jarius Sneed's this guy who has had a lot better success and better play playing in the slot despite having like an outside corner's body. You lose Jarvis Ward. So there's an opening there, but this is also a defense that's been able to live with Rashad Fenton, which, that speaks for itself because he's nothing to write home about. So they've been able to make it work with, mediocre cornerback play, we'll call it. Justin Reed feels like a nice way to kind of soften the blow from losing Tyrann Mathieu. So, I think the Chiefs did a really good job. They lost some big-time impact players in Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, and Tyreek Hill, but they did an awesome job kind of improving the rest of the roster, smoothing out maybe where the talent is across the 53-man roster. So definitely some big names lost, but this team, all in all, might be as good, maybe marginally better. Cincinnati Bengals, I got them at 3, and I got the Rams at 2, so our Super Bowl competitors coming right next to one another. And, these two teams, I'm not necessarily sure they're better than the Chiefs and the Bucs, or, even the Ravens and Packers for that matter. But as it stands right now, looking at Cincinnati, they made it to the Super Bowl, and they not only fixed their one weakness, I'm not even worried about the offensive line now. Maybe left guard with Jackson Carman / Hakeem Adeniji, but you could probably find someone else if those two are really putrid to fill in and play left guard. But Jonah Williams and Ted Karras, left tackle, center, and then at right guard, Alex Kaplan. At right tackle, you bring in Lyle Collins. Your work is done. Duke Tobin, fantastic work, my man. Fixed that entire offensive line in just, a year's time. People were complaining about Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. So great work there, and then the rest of the offseason was just focused on where can we get slightly better. And, their draft approach was, hey, we don't have any holes, let's just go best player available. Let's draft a Dax Hill. Let's draft a Cam Taylor-Britt because potentially we can use them, and we think they're the best player for us right now. So the process was sound. They made it to the Super Bowl last year. In Burrow and Jamar Chase, we trust, especially if you're a Cincinnati fan. I'm not. But, that duo is dynamite, so this team can certainly make another run towards the Super Bowl this year. And the Rams, you don't bring back Von Miller, but, your next biggest loss is Andrew Whitworth retiring, future Hall of Famer. Don't want to mitigate that, but Joseph Noteboom looked great against the Bucs. Now, maybe that goes back to my pass rush concerns with Tampa Bay, but Noteboom looks like a guy who could fill in and be an adequate replacement. So the Von Miller loss feels like it looms a little large, at least as of right now. But dare I say they got better at wide receiver? Like, Robert Woods is really good, and he's underrated, especially what he does as a blocker. But just as a pure receiver, I think Allen Robinson's still a better guy. Like, I think he's a bit better of a crisp route runner, and I think he wins a little bit more at all three levels. I think you can do a little bit more down the field with Allen Robinson. So, dare I say they got better. And Robert Woods cap hit, I think, at $16.25 million this year. Average salary per year for Allen Robinson, $15 a pop. They might have gotten better and cheaper at that position, which is just baffling. And I anticipate them bringing back OBJ, which I'm not counting that in this equation just yet, but I figure it's going to happen eventually. Cam Akers, rush back from that Achilles injury. Hopefully, he'll be more efficient now with another full offseason to really rest up and get back to 100%. So it's a potent offense, the best defensive player in football, and the best quarterback in football as well. Jalen Ramsey, didn't mention him until now, but he's kind of one of those guys you'll need to talk about to know that he's there and know that he's really good. So I think the defense headlined by its stars, will be really solid. To bring in Bobby Wagner, they got to start literally all three levels. The defense will be more than fine, and this offense is going to be explosive. So, yeah, I got them at number 2, and then I got the Bills at number 1. I'm a huge Josh Allen fan. Been an elite quarterback each of the last 2 years. No reason to see that falling off now. I think Gabe Davis is going to, have a sizable step forward. First time he's been a consistent, reliable starter on the outside, or at least the role is reliably there. We'll see if he himself is reliable. Stephon Diggs is still one of the best wide receivers in football in my eyes. The offensive line maybe got better with Ryder Saffold. Concerned about Spencer Brown at right tackle, but for the most part, the O-line is fine. You bring in a James Cook to go along with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Feels like that room got better. I do worry a little bit. Brian Daboll is often considered the archetype of the rise of Josh Allen, but a lot of people also point towards Ken Dorsey, once quarterback's coach, now offensive coordinator. So if you're a Bills fan, you feel like there's going to be some consistency and cohesiveness still there, despite Daboll leaving and Dorsey taking over. Also, I should note, QB coach Joe Brady. Pretty solid resume, considering his work with Joe Burrow, and it didn't really come together in Carolina, but I don't really think that was any fault of his own. But I think it's interesting he's their QB coach, and in a year's time, and I plan on making a head coaching video. I don't know if he'll be a head coach candidate quite yet, but the Bills are going to be towards the top of the NFL in yards, passing yards, scoring per game, touchdown, a myriad of offensive stats, and Joe Brady's going to go from a quarterback coach to an offensive coordinator somewhere on the coattails of Ken Dorsey, Josh Allen, and the rest of the crew. That's just the offense. And then the defense, you bring in Von Miller, pretty much a 3-year, $54 million deal. Safe way of looking at it, or $51 million deal, excuse me. But him on top of their prior investments with Greg Rousseau and AJ Epineza, like what they have done, trying to transform that defensive line and get younger there. Tremaine Edmonds is still under 25 years old, so maybe he finally takes that step forward at the inside linebacker position. But he's been okay. Matt Milano's been pretty solid in coverage. He provides value. Kyrie Elam, you move up 2 spots. You finally give Tredavis White that number 2 guy that's, Levi Wallace, I think, is league average. And, I'm hoping he's better than that even in Pittsburgh. He's just got a great story. He's overcome a ton of stuff. I'd like to see him succeed. But, for the most part, been a league average quarterback in Buffalo. Maybe Kyrie Elam can be a little bit more and be that above average CB2 opposite Tredavis White and take that secondary to a whole nother level, because, of course, the safeties are awesome as well. Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. So, to me, when I look at the Bills roster, I got the best one, so I got to put it at number 1 in my way too early power rankings. Now, of course, all this is subject to change. I'll do this again once we get to the NFL regular season or just before it, and we'll go over these thoughts once again. So all these are subject to change, but give me your way too early power rankings down below in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who's your favorite team? Where do you think they should slot in at? Love to have your thoughts. Let's talk some football down below in the comment section. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button and help me out a ton. If you're new right here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button and help us get closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, my name is Teach, and I'm signing off.